behalf, first of all, was to say he sends his regards and best wishes to everyone who's here. He would have liked to be here, but unfortunately, because we are in a pandemic, and my mother's health isn't the greatest. She's fragile when it comes to respiratory stuff. So, being the gentleman he is, he didn't want to take any risks, even though the risks are very low. He said there's still a risk, and he just wouldn't want to do that. So he apologizes for not being here, but he knows that you will understand. On the introduction, Chief Yakalaya mentioned that my dad worked with a lot of former chiefs, former leaders in the early days in the Indian Brotherhood, and in some of his notes that he put together, he did want me to mention that working with these leadership of the day, as he referred to them as powerhouses, he has many fond memories during his time with Dene Nation. He mentioned former leaders, many whom have passed on, such as Chief Andrew Sturt. He mentions and was happy to see his old friend and colleague, Mr. George Erasmus, last year, or a couple years ago here. He mentions George Kodakin. He mentioned Paul Andrew, Alexis Aeromaker, Francois Paulette, Frank Laviette, Jerry Cheesy, Hyacinth Andre, Frank Tizzelli, Fred Andrew, Johnny Charlie, Paul Baton, Roy Fabian, Jim Burke, and many others, Charlie Snowshoe, many others. There were so many, and he recalls them to be a very hardworking group. Yes, they had challenges, but they had one vision. And back then, that vision, back in those early days, was to stand hard for the rights of Aboriginal people, of the Dene people. And that group, including many others, were the first real political trailblazers to Ottawa, standing up for our treaty rights and our Aboriginal rights. And they were taught by the elders and leaders before them too. So he wanted me to make mention of those people. And he highlighted things during the early days. He talked about when they changed the name from Indian Brotherhood and did the transition to Dene Nation, that happened at the assembly in Fort Simpson. He also talked about the Berger inquiry and how that showed all the Aboriginal people across Northwest Territories unite, and what that achieved. There was no land claims back then, and they made sure that there would be no development across Denendeh until we reached those points. And that was their vision. And there's a lot here, and I don't usually get nervous to speak, but accepting an award on behalf of my dad and saying thank you, I just feel nervous all of a sudden. But it's because of the respect I have for him. And he mentioned, in his earlier days before getting into politics, he said he worked on, did other jobs, working. He mentioned, I think it was sorry, it's not on here, it was cut off on the page, but I think it was William MacDonald, Norman Wells. He said he remembers working with him back then, and hauling freight on the old C-46 planes, and then working on Pepper's boat with folks like Thomas Manuel and Art Furlong, and what is the other guy's name here? John DeRosie. So he just sharing all these. He wanted me to share that, these are good, fond memories that he still thinks about. And I know, being his daughter, that when Dene Nation due to some health issues he had in '86, he resigned, and then stepped back up in '93 to serve his final term. But I know, being his daughter, that working for his people, our people, and being a part of the nation was very dear to him. He was very passionate about it. And so when the vision that this powerhouse group shared, their end result was that they thought they were going to have this one government that would be bigger than GNWT. And we all know, things happen, things change, and there's reasons why. But I know, being his daughter, that when things started to change and fall apart, he was very hurt. He was very upset. But being, I think, a true leader, you get past that, and because it's not about just you. It's okay to be angry about things, but you always got to bring that vision back to unity, and that's one thing he always talked about too. And I just wanted to share that on his behalf, because he sends his best regards to everyone, and he hopes that the Dene Nation can continue to achieve unity and to still be strong like they once were. He listened a bit on the radio yesterday, and one thing he said is they're still talking about that constitution. They did form it way back when, but he really hopes to see present day leaders make those decisions to move on with it. And he just has a lot to say, and I don't want to take up too much more of our evening, but one of the other things he did say that he was very busy with his work, but being a Gwich'in man, he also made sure that, and I seen it growing up, is he also, trapped, hunted, fished like all of our Aboriginal men do, and he had to, because he had to provide for my mom and 10 kids, and it's just things like that I really respected about him, and I'm honored to accept the award on his behalf. And he's 83 years old now, and living in the Klavik with my mom. They've been married 60 years, and they do really just really care about all our people, not just the Gwich'in, but all our Aboriginal people, and I know they would like to be here. But on their behalf, I again say thank you, and wish you all the very best on behalf of my dad, former Chief Freddie Greenland. Masicho.